All right, go ahead and start us out. Your line is, welcome to Show and Tell.
I know. I was just finding my voice. So anyway, guys, welcome to Show and Tell. I'm Daniel Gilmore.
I'm Jesse Hughes. This is a podcast about movies. We're doing something a little different this week, so we usually allot ourselves a lot of time to talk about the movie. We're on a time crunch because life. So if this show sounds a little different, that's why. So we're going to go ahead and
So let's just jump right into it.
take it away.
We watched Zodiac, 2007, directed by David Fincher.
David Fincher.
My first note on the film was just that opening sequence. And it's like fireworks going and just like a steady cam shot out the passenger side of a window.
Which is very Fincher. There's another shot pretty close to the beginning just like that. David Fincher, just touching on him, he's one of my favorite directors. There's 3 of his more recent movies, this being one of them, that I wanted to recommend for the podcast, and this is the one I went with because I thought you might enjoy it a little more as a fan of horror, since it's kind of this tale of a serial killer based on a true story. The only blemish on David Fincher's catalog that I've seen, and I've probably, the oldest movie of his that I've seen is probably 7, so I haven't seen anything from before that, is The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Have you seen that?
Yes, I've seen that.
That it's just not a good movie. Like, if you didn't tell me that David Fincher directed it, I would have no idea, because his signature...
Yeah, it's nothing at all like anything he would have directed.
I mean, subject matter, yes, but even his signature is not on the film anywhere. But other than that, I consider David Fincher to be one of the best directors. His movies are just so polished, so concise. They're just some of my favorite movies, and of course, this is one of them. The opening sequence in the car, the kid is just totally clueless about poontang. That just made me laugh.
Yeah, he has no. I was like, kid, what are you doing?
What are we doing here?
We're just sitting in the car talking on like make-out point.
Yeah, where are we? I like rewatching it and realizing that it seems like she knows who was in the car, which is an interesting, tidbit. What was going on in her head as she. Of course, this is something that the director added in, but it's really cool. Looking at all the trivia and interesting facts about the movie, is it was put together based on Robert Graysmith's book, who's the lead character in the movie. But a lot of the movie is also colored by research that David Fincher and the writer of the movie did together, which is really cool.
Real crime, as I am interested in the serial killers. I was going to say a fan. Not necessarily a fan of them.
Of what now?
Serial killers.
Oh.
But it's just something that's very interesting to me since I was a child. So I already knew about the case going in and it being unsolved.
Right. And that's kind of one of the things about the movie is it's so compelling that it stays so interesting, even though they don't ever definitively say, here's the killer, he's under arrest, all that, and that it's kind of a cool experience knowing that throughout the movie and still being as enthralled as I was watching the movie. The intro sets the tone for the way the movie is going to be. It's expert and relentless directing. There's not really any hiding what's going on. A lot of times in a movie you'll have, even in an R-rated movie, you'll have some shots that kind of mute what's going on in terms of the action, but this movie never does. And it starts with that first scene where the killer is just relentless in how he delivers his, whatever he wants to call it, justice to these kids. And we see it the way that they would have experienced it. It's kind of jarring. It's kind of hard to watch, but it sets up the movie and lets us know what kind of movie this is going to be.
My next note was just Robert Downey Jr. is probably the weakest actor in the film.
What?
I thought. But other than those 2 kids.
That's not to say he's weak, right? Is that you thought his performance was weak?
Yeah, I didn't think it was that great.
I mean, he's very Robert Downey Jr.
And maybe that was it. He was just not playing anything special. It was just like, I'm Robert Downey Jr. here.
Yeah,
I'm a fan of Robert Downey Jr., like, don't get me wrong. But it's like, oh, he could be Tony Stark in this role.
Well, yeah. We were, as usual, watching it with my wife, Amy. The camera pans across the newsroom, and she goes, hey, that guy looks like Tony Stark. And I went, that is Tony Stark. She's like, no, that guy over there looks just like Tony Stark. I said, it's Robert Downey Jr. She's like, oh, he's in this. Oh, he plays the detective. I'm like, no, that's the Hulk.
Which, yes, Mark Ruffalo also in this.
Mark Ruffalo, fantastic. Probably my favorite role of his. I remember watching the opening scene with my brother, the second opening scene, watching it from the mail carrier. So it's another steady cam shot from a moving, object. And he walked into the room and said, oh, this must be a David Fincher movie. A signature shot of his. Mm-hmm. I like how the energetic music kind of reflects the times, but it's offset by the somber tone of the movie. With the first letter comes in kind of this movie's approach to chapters. The movie really takes place in these different chapters. I want to say, based on my notes, probably 8 different chapters in the movie, and they're all very distinct. The movie is very good at variety, in my opinion. And this first letter kind of denotes the end of the introduction and the beginning of chapter 1, which is where we basically get to meet the Zodiac. And it makes it clear that, this movie is going to be very piecemeal in terms of meeting the killer and then watching all of these different characters and how the killer affects them and vice versa.
Yeah, and it's more like, because the Zodiac, while being a character, he's not an actual character in the movie.
Well, right.
So yeah, just getting down through the letters and stuff, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
For this movie, there wasn't much to talk about. It's a really solid film, and there is some humor within the movie itself. But, it's mostly solid performances, and some of the actors I thought were a little stiff in their roles.
Like who?
Honestly, I couldn't tell you without going back and looking at it again. I wasn't making notes exactly of who.
Right.
But just there's some stiff scenes. I think they all did it. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe it's just based on a book,
Right.
So it's that's what it is.
You don't have anything specific on a scene that you felt was stiffer?
No, not particularly. Like I said, it was just just notes. They'd be like, "Oh yeah," and I was like, "That just was kind of like a wooden delivery."
For me, this is another 5-star out of 5-star movie. I don't think there's anything wrong with this movie at all. So that's an interesting perspective. And
I'll go back.
Yeah, let me know if you come up. Sorry, guys. No, if you have any specific scenes that I'd like to talk about. I'm going scene by scene here, so you might come up with something as we go along. I like Robert Downey Jr.'s character. He's very dry wit, and again, that's Robert Downey Jr. But I still thought it fit with the character he was playing and watching his arc throughout the story. I cover crime in Vallejo. I guess I cover crime in Vallejo. There's, he's usually the character that makes you chuckle throughout the movie. And then you've got Jake Gyllenhaal, always fantastic, plays a very subtle role here. He's a cartoon artist. And then I like, the beginning scene, the justification for not posting or for wanting to post the note on the first page. If he kills 12 people, it's not our fault. It's all about let's avoid guilt here. I want to be able to sleep at night. And then they have the bar that Robert Downey Jr. and the guys at the newsroom frequent. It's called Morty's, which is Mortis is Italian for death.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool.
I just like the scene at the bar with Robert Downey and Jake when they finally talk. He's like, "What is that blue drink you're drinking?"
Oh yeah, that's such a great scene. That's a little later, but yeah, this cannot be ignored. What are you drinking? He's like, "You wouldn't make fun of it if you tried it."
Yeah, and then
he's just lying on that. Love that scene.
There's 5 of them on the calendar.
One of my favorite scenes ever in anything.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty great.
I like the reference to The Most Dangerous Game. Really, it's a book we grew up, reading in school, at least in, where I grew up. So it was a cool reference, and it really instantly makes Zodiac, understandable, I guess, is that his motivation is this story that most of the viewers watching the movie are familiar with. So it allows us to relate to him, even though we technically don't ever see him. Like you said, we are getting to know him entirely through these letters. We don't ever know for sure who he is, even though there are characters in the movie that it hints at it being.
Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing too, is there was some, maybe copycat letters and stuff.
Right, exactly. And it's all kind of up in the air. It's all very ambiguous. You're not sure even by the end of the movie. And then you've got chapter 2 beginning with the couple killing. And this is probably the hardest killing to watch.
That was my favorite scene in the movie.
It's just it's dark. It's a little bit humorous. Oh, we're very good looking. That's why he's looking at us. But just then watching it happen, what's going to happen, and watching it take place. And then again, Fincher does not move the camera away at all from the murder itself. And my wife was gritting her teeth and going, she's seen it. We both seen it. It feels like this is the only way it could have been directed, because this is based on something that was real, something that really happened. And another cool tidbit is that David Fincher refused to film any scenes for people that Zodiac killed for which there was no survivor. So he would only do the scenes where there was a survivor, because he could collaborate with that person in making the film and make the scene as accurate as possible.
And I noticed that too. So I thought that was pretty interesting, because it's no conjecture. It's like...
Exactly. Yeah. Very thorough, very Fincher. But it's intriguing by the end of this scene, noting that in both of the killings we've seen, the men survive. So, is the Zodiac sexist? Was he affected by women as a child, and he has it out for them to basically punish them more severely than the men? And the men.
Well, they say he was getting wrapped up in the killings for the women.
Right, exactly. And, it's kind of interesting thinking about why. Jake Gyllenhaal realizes the most dangerous game connection because he had mentioned it in the first letter of the Zodiac. Yeah. And he pulls the book out of nowhere. But he comes back and he says, King Zaroff, or whatever his name is. And he says, Robert Downey Jr.'s character is Zaroff with a Z. All of his revelations in the movie are just kind of dumb-witted. He's just like trying to make as many connections as he can as he interacts with Jake Gyllenhaal's character. This is kind of the beginning of their relationship, which is fictionalized completely. They actually didn't know each other in real life, but it was fictionalized for the sake of the movie, which is understandable. Then we jump into chapter 3, which starts with a really slick top-down camera over the cab, which is really cool. And I have no idea how they directed that, like how they filmed that.
It had to be crane shots,
right? But the camera stays perfectly with the car as it turns. That's the part that gets me. Like, how does that? I don't know how they do that. It could have been computer animated. There could have been some digital stuff in there. Most of the scenes in the movie were filmed where they actually took place, but this scene, the cab death, was actually mostly a set due to people in the neighborhood being uncooperative. Basically, they weren't cool with the filming happening there, probably because people lived there who were there during the killings and they didn't want to relive that. So this is one of the few scenes that doesn't take place in the actual location where this event happened, where he kills the cab driver. Mm-hmm. A really clever use of the song Ring Around the Rosie as he exits the cab after killing the cabbie. And then we get to meet Dave Toschi, Mark Ruffalo's character.
Fixated with animal crackers?
Yeah, I never...
I didn't understand that.
Never understood. Maybe this was when animal crackers first became popular, and it's just something to denote, like, here's the time that this took place in, or I don't know how long...
I don't think they were, because, I think they've been around since, P.T. Barnum days.
It could be true. I don't know. Yeah, it's a funny little character trait that's visited, 3 times, and then halfway through the movie, it's like they never talk about it again. Of course, his partner leaves, and so I guess that's it. Maybe he stops... consuming animal crackers at that point because he has no one to bring them to him. I love that he finds out that his partner, it's his birthday, and his partner says, "You want the scene or the body?" And he says, "Oh, it's your birthday. I'll take the body." It's a great scene because you get to see kind of the breakdown of how they work in terms of how they try to put together this crime scene and relive what actually happened. And a lot of scenes in this movie work like this, and it's something Fincher's really good at, is this mystery element and watching these people as they try to solve the mystery. And this is the perspective of the investigators whose job it is to find out who Zodiac is and what kind of person he is.
Yeah, I like that just bit between him and his partner. Mm-hmm. He's like, is he stupid? He's like, no, you waited for the cabbie to drive off or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or unbuckle, whatever it was.
Then why'd you take your gloves off? Yeah. Why'd you get into the front seat? It's all very interesting. And then we cut to Robert Downey Jr., who's really good at smoking and talking at the same time. Pops a cigarette in his mouth, and then the whole scene this is what was the Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. There's a scene where he sticks a cigarette in his mouth and he lights it and he just kind of rolls it around in his mouth, and I'm like, he's really good at smoking. Very, very stylish. And then we meet another important character who's the handwriting expert. Can't remember his name, but again, great pacing with the introduction of characters. This is another interesting character, integral to the story because it really boils down to, like they said, handwriting and fingerprints. Those are the pieces of evidence that basically broke the case in terms of, it's make or break. And in this case, if the real killer walked away, it was because his handwriting or his fingerprints didn't match what they had. And then we jump into the next chapter, which begins with the TV interview with Melvin Belli, which is, again, another character that we meet who's important to the story. By my list, this is the first consistent actor that we've had in our podcast, the first actor that's shown up in more than one movie. Brian Cox. Oh, yeah. Who appeared in Her as the voice of the philosopher. I can't recall his name. You might.
Which character does John Ennis play, though?
He was a detective from another department.
Okay. I was like, oh, yeah, John Ennis cameo.
What else is he in?
He's a comedian.
Okay.
If you look it up, he's been in a bunch of stuff as well. I know him, like I said, more from comedy stuff.
Yeah, he was good. Small role in this movie, but he was the one who brought in the kid from the very first killing, the survivor, to ask him to identify Zodiac. A really cool tidbit. We're jumping to the end of the film, but whatever. This actually happened as a result of the movie. So them finding him to ask him to identify the killer was actually something that the producers of the movie had done in their research. So that last scene was actually the result of this film being made.
That's really cool.
Another cool piece of trivia is that the case was actually closed until this movie started being made. They reopened it after the movie was released. Then we jump into the next chapter. That's the scene with the drink where they're in the bar and Paul Avery, Robert Downey Jr.'s character, starts to become interested in Jake Gyllenhaal's involvement.
He just likes puzzles.
Yeah, he just likes puzzles. That's all it is. It's interesting the different perspectives that we see in this movie. We've got the detectives who have to find him because it's their job. You've got Paul Avery, who is a reporter, so he has to just cover him. And then you've got Robert Graysmith, who has no stake in this, and that's what this scene between him and Paul Avery. He says, "What do you mean?" It's a cool, it's an interesting perspective, and of course we find out what he gets out of it is just this gratification in knowing. Who it was that did it. I just need to know. I need to look him in the eye and I need to know it's him. What is your business in this? And he says, how do you mean business? Gratification comes for different people in different ways. And we witness that in every different character in this movie and the stake that they have in what Zodiac is doing. The movie also portrays a very convincing passing of time despite the short scenes with long gaps. So we have the scene, it's 4 months later. That's not this next chapter, but there's 4 years later,
There was just one chunk of time.
Right.
It was just like month, year, 7 months.
Exactly. And I think even though, we see these little snippets and it's jumping very consistently, it still feels, the way the movie is filmed and paced, it still feels like that amount of time has passed. Looking at like the film's length in ratio to how these scenes are filmed.
Well, for me, the length of the film wasn't an issue. I didn't ever think it felt long.
Exactly. That's what's great about it. Like I really, really enjoyed watching it again, and there really wasn't. Sometimes when you watch a movie this long and you've seen it a couple times, you get a little fatigued halfway through, but I really didn't. So then we got the next chapter. This is 5 or 6 with the roadside killing. Again, this is there's a lot of variety in the killings that we see. Of course, these were real, so it's not a fictionalized variety. It's a real variety. And this is another, haunting, the end of this scene. Before I kill you, I'm going to throw your baby out the window. It's just this very subtle, very haunting line. And then we don't see anything happen. We just come up upon her again, and she has jumped out of the car and hidden her baby. Out of fear that someone else might try to do something. Another chapter, it's a cool montage scene that shows all the characters' different involvement and different roles. And another cool layer is introduced, the idea of the killer not being a consistent person. So in one way you have, are these copycat killers, or are these people who are taking these murders that have not been spoken about by anyone that may have done it or may not have done it, and so they want to claim it for themselves? Or are the murders themselves actually being committed by these people? So is Zodiac not one consistent person, or is it just that these murders are happening and there's no one to blame for it? So you have these people coming in wanting the attention and claiming that they did it, and then of course basing their information on news articles and things that the public would know. Dave Toschi says to his partner, happy birthday. And so we know a year has passed since the cab killing, which has been maybe a year and a half since the first killing. And then we find out that because of Paul Avery, Robert Downey Jr.'s character, because of the slander he has put towards Zodiac in his articles, he is now being targeted, and now everyone's wearing buttons that say, I am not Paul Avery, including Paul Avery, which is funny. And then we jump into relationships, and now we meet Melanie, who is going to be Robert Graysmith's wife. What's the actress's name?
Chloe Sevigny.
Right, yeah, she's great. I love her.
So but she's in the scene. Mm-hmm. He gets her to pay for a phone call so he can call Robert Downey Jr.'s character. Mm-hmm. Then she's like, oh, is this a weird ploy to get me back to your house? He says no. She's like, all right, I'll get taken.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, go back to his house.
Well, his delivery of no was very convincing. He's just this really naive, innocent kid, basically. He's a Boy Scout, as they call him throughout the movie. So, yeah, that was a funny
But then you don't see her again.
What do you mean?
You don't see, she's gone for 40 minutes.
And then she's his wife.
Yes.
Several years later, after the 4-year stint, he has a wife and kids, 3 neglected children.
No, she took care of him. He totally has them write a book with him.
Yeah, right.
They're fact checking. Don't tell Mom about our special activity.
David Fincher gave Jake Gyllenhaal a baby doll with a diaper to change to prepare him for fatherhood. And I read that tidbit and I went, that's not very accurate because he wasn't a great father. So,
well, yeah, he trained on dolls.
He provided for, he provided for them. Maybe that was David Fincher's point. But he jumps into the date with Melanie. Where were you? I was at the gun range. What were you doing at the gun range? Reading.
Yeah.
And then we again, the relationship between Robert and Paul. Robert cares about Paul. When Melanie says that sounds kind of stupid. That sounds dangerous.
It's dangerous and stupid.
He's like, you're right, it is. I gotta go help him. And then later in the movie, she mentions as they're drifting apart, she says, "Oh, this marriage basically is just the date that never ended," and that's kind of a cool point. It's he struggles with their relationship, both with his wife and his kids, later in the movie because he's so fixated on the Zodiac. And we realize with that line that she mentions, that it was the date that never ended, that he's always been this way. He's always been obsessed with this. So it's kind of cool to see him spiral into wanting to just absolutely know who the Zodiac is.
Well, yeah, no, I thought that was a great line. Just because she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna stick around. This is like really interesting, or whatever."
This is the most interesting
clearly what she did
I've ever had, and she stuck around for a long time. Another cool piece of trivia: they showed the screenplay to the real Robert Graysmith, and the only comment he made after reading it was, "Wow, I see why my wife left me." That's too bad.
That's too funny.
Paul Avery has made a discovery basically from the Vallejo files. This is the beginning of where we find out that the departments working together didn't quite work together the way it should. As throughout the movie, from this point on, there's a lot of facts that weren't given to
the other department,
the main department. So we're in Torrance, California in the next chapter, and this is really the first big break where we finally have a face to look at and say, is this the Zodiac? And the scene, the directing makes it apparent that this is a very important person in terms of the investigation. Yeah, this scene is incriminating as hell. Everything he said, he's very nervous, and he's like, "Oh, by the way, if someone mentions the bloody knives in my car," I was like, well done, guy. I wonder how accurate, this scene is, because they probably referenced investigation and interview notes to make this scene. And so I wonder if he was as nervous, in real life as he is in this scene in the movie.
I can never remember this guy's name, but it was Drew Carey's brother on the Drew Carey Show.
Oh, the real actor?
Yes.
I didn't bother to look that up.
He's pretty famous. He's in a lot of stuff.
Okay.
But that's what I'll always remember him from.
I like his character's edginess in this movie. Like if you ask him a certain question, he gets really edgy, standoffish, kind of rude, but he's never overtly
just like
violent.
I can't wait for the day they stop calling cops pigs.
Right? Yeah, exactly. That kind of attitude, it makes it believable. It makes him believable as he is the prime suspect throughout the movie. As the Zodiac killer. But it's kind of ambiguous. It's not incriminating. It's circumstantial, but it makes sense for his personality to be like this. It makes it believable that he would do it, but also that he would get away with it. Mm-hmm. Is he toying with them, or is he? Completely legitimate? Is he getting, at this point you're meeting this character and you're going, it sounds like he's just an ace. He is the Zodiac, but is he a copycat? Is he someone who admires the Zodiac and he wants to look like the Zodiac? That's kind of an interesting perspective to look at. And then a really cool, the idea of handwriting being manifested physically, is they're denying the handwriting from certain suspects, and they're trying to work around this suspect that they like, Arthur Lee Allen. Yes, that's it. Got it. The idea that the handwriting could be manifested physically, and that he has multiple personalities, and his handwriting would be different than what they're able to compare it to, basically. And then they are in the office, Toschi, his partner, and the chief of police, I guess. They're breaking down all the evidence to the judge, or to the guy who gets the warrant from the judge, and it's a very convincing, everything's very, very small, very, you could say circumstantial, but it all adds up to something big. Mm-hmm. Makes it believable that they would get in and be able to get this warrant to search Lee's trailer. During this scene, as the other Toschi's partner, names, is picking stuff up. He's picking up guns and putting them down, and I'm going, why aren't you wearing gloves?
Yeah.
That seems like a huge oversight. Haven't you learned from the killer? Wear gloves.
Cops in the 70s.
And then they're watching, and then it shoots to the theater shot. They're watching Dirty Harry. The villain of that movie, Scorpio, was inspired by the Zodiac, so they're watching this movie, and And this is where Robert and
Meets
Dave
him,
meet.
yeah.
We jump into the longest time gap then. It's 4 years
Oh,
later.
you mean where it's 50 minutes of a black screen?
Yeah.
Or 50 seconds,
It's
sorry.
radio shots.
There's nothing. It's just sound.
Well, that's true. Like, I thought that listening to it, and I was going, none of this really has to do with the Zodiac. It's probably, you know, as time goes by, these are big news articles throughout that time period of 4 years. I don't know. But, I mean, it gave me opportunity to take notes, so I didn't criticize it.
Yeah, I was watching it. I was like, literally 50 seconds.
You were like, what's wrong with the movie? Oh, I got a bad...
of like just
got
nothing.
a bad copy. Yeah. And there's, I realized with the movie being as ambiguous as it is, the movie and the ending itself, there's a lot of different times the movie could end, but it, at this point, it still has more story to tell. It has more stories to tell. So I like how all the different characters, they have their own story and they're all very unique. But we get to watch them all play out to, a satisfying end to me anyway.
Yeah. Then as soon as like that minute's up, Chloe Sevigny is reintroduced. And he's married.
Oh yeah, they're married.
And I was like, okay, I was wondering what happened over there.
And then at this point, you're reintroduced to the late and great Paul Avery. He's pretty much dead, and he lives in a really badass boathouse
with Pong.
With Pong, yeah. Look at that. The kids are
Well, I just heard it, and I was like, it's Pong, and he's like, check that out, and I'm like, yes, it's Pong.
Just playing itself.
Not even. He's just over his life.
He's asking Robert's asking Paul about evidence. He's like, you have this, and this, right? He's like, trying to explain. I don't, and then I moved into a boat. All right, I don't really have anything anymore. And this is a cool scene that provides closure to Paul's story. He's an alcoholic. He's basically going to wither away, and he does. We see him briefly again later in the movie, but it just kind of shows us where he went. 4 years later without having to spend too much time on his character because his role has ended in the Zodiac story. And I love the recurring dialogue in this movie, the themes that they go back to at this scene. They come back to the library when Paul Avery's gone and the new guy's taking his place.
He says the same line.
Yeah,
like a great.
There's a full circle line. There's like 4 or 5 lines like that in the movie, and they're
reporter
all
used to be there.
Very clever, yeah. It's amazing how they keep the movie interesting to this point because we're beyond 2 hours now, and then this last part, this last chapter of the movie is really Graysmith writing the book. The ink has dried, if you will, and like Toschi says, too much time has gone by. There's too much evidence missing, and so all that's left is for Robert to do what he can to write this book and give himself closure, basically, on knowing who the Zodiac is. So he's going in and he's trying to get evidence from different police departments, and he's like, we don't talk to writers. I'm not a writer, I'm a cartoonist.
Yeah.
So this is the point where they realize how kind of kooky he is, and it's just like, all right, he's a hobbyist. Let's give him whatever he wants. He can see this stuff. It's public, record, whatever. And then you have the montage of him going through all the evidence, and he has to remember everything, so he can't write anything down. I love me a good Fincher investigation montage.
Which is like, there's a line, he's like, I can't do that, or something, and then Baker Street just starts playing.
Oh yeah. That was a really cool. Well, that was the very end. That was when he went up to go look Lee in the eyes to know, and then Baker Street starts playing.
Is that what it is?
That's his Sherlock Holmes moment. Yeah, which is again another clever use of music in the movie.
Well, I thought because when he's putting everything together and he's trying to find the guy and he finds the posters and he's like, he did the posters.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, no, I did the posters.
That-
and I'm like, who the fuck is this guy?
Yeah, right?
I
Yeah.
thought he was the killer.
That scene is it's a really ambiguous scene, and it's just thrown in there to kind of, I'm sure it actually happened. I'm sure that person was real, but it leaves more up in the air in terms of the story, which it was real. It really happened. It's not just for the sake of being a confusing movie. But yeah, it's very confusing. It's like, well, why is this guy's handwriting the closest match? Maybe they worked together. I don't know. But
that's again going to saying if there's more than one of them.
Right, exactly.
And they said like Arthur Lee Allen was never actually convicted.
Right.
He was the sole suspect.
Right.
Even though they said it didn't match him or whatever.
Right, exactly. Yeah, all the different things that were against him in terms of that. So I'm assuming they didn't go into further investigation of this guy in the house where he goes in. But there's just so many moments where, and it's believable because Robert is very naive. But he's like, why are you going into the basement with him? Why,
don't you want to go?
Did you?
Are you coming?
Yeah. Why didn't you just go to a coffee shop? I'd be like, no. Of course he doesn't think he's the killer, but it's like, no, let's go to a coffee shop. I don't want to go to your house. But of course he's intrigued because there's probably something at his house that he can see. He wants to know about that secret.
Film.
Yeah, that secret film canister.
But But yeah, it just seemed like to me how that whole scene plays out. Like this guy's the killer.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because he even kind of is like he's super creepy about it.
Exactly.
And
I think he's just having fun with it. You know, he knows what he's assuming, but it's not true, which is kind of, you know, again, you don't know that, but.
Well, I mean, he very well could be because this guy was out there and he's sending them notes and stuff. Like,
right.
Come find me.
Yeah. Like you said, they mentioned there might have been more than one person.
The same thing they mentioned.
But this scene kind of, you know, paints the reality that maybe not only were there more than one person, but they were actually working together. They weren't just copycatting each other. And then he has his argument with his wife, you know, about his obsessiveness. And, you know, she ends the scene by saying, hey, your toast is burning. So we know that she's grounded in this reality that she's trying very delicately to bring him back to. But, of course, slowly realizes how futile it is and pulls the kids away, which we witness later. And then he's knocking on Dave Tosky's door. And, you know, you're going, a
couple other scenes go by because he gets the fax or the printout. Right. Of his driver's license.
Yeah. Slaps it on the door. You know, he's got to have something good to have the nerve to wake up Tosky after he's
just yelling at him. He's like, I'm going to get my gun.
I don't ever want to see you.
And he goes, Arthur Lee Allen.
I'm going to kill him. Arthur Lee Allen. And then he's like, where'd you get that name?
Yeah. Then they get some dinner.
And then, that breakfast scene. That's the whole breakdown of where he convinces Tosky that he was right all along, which of course Tosky wants to hear, so it's believable that he would again get involved with him. And it's just a great scene. Again, it's just like the rapport between the two detectives where they're talking about this is why it's him. And it's still circumstantial. It's still not finite, but it's finite enough that both characters...
she lived next door to him.
Mm-hmm.
Or
right.
Like 5, whatever it was.
Exactly. Like that is less than 50 yards. I've walked it myself. And flabbergasted, Mark Ruffalo's character says, good job, finish the book. Because he knows, you know, there's nothing we can do now but write your book and we'll see what happens. So it's this point that I started thinking about how public popularity can interfere with an investigation. The Zodiac killing was so popular that they had so many people calling in and saying they had tips. You know, Joe Schmo with a creepy cousin. Oh, it's got to be my creepy cousin. I hate that guy. He must be the Zodiac.
Killed him with a hammer.
Yeah. So it's interesting how Robert turns up all this information that didn't get shared. He goes into all these interviews that the police should have had, but they weren't able to because they were so saturated with all these calls and all these people that wanted to be part of the solution, basically, or wanted, you know, someone that they knew to be the killer so that there was a solution for them and for basically everyone who wanted to know what Zodiac was. But yeah, another interesting element to the story itself is all the people that did call in to the police that had legitimate information about who you assume is the Zodiac that didn't get through because of how popular the case itself was. Mm-hmm. And then the ending itself of the movie, I love the ending of this movie. It's as satisfying as it can be because, you know, he wanted to see him and know.
And he goes into the hardware store where he works.
And then we have Baker Street as he looks at him and he's, yeah, that's him. So I'm sorry I recommended a movie that you didn't have much to add to. And I realized that watching the movie, it was kind of like Intolerable Cruelty. It's a movie you tell people to go watch. It's a very, very solid telling of this story, but it's a story that we generally know. So my general fascination with it is the conciseness of the script, the dialogue, the editing, the directing, the acting. It's all aces for me. It's a 5 out of 5 for me. But I mean, sounds like you liked it, but you didn't have much to talk about with it, so maybe you give it a 3.5, 3. What?
2.5.
2.5? I mean, what was wrong with the movie?
I just didn't think it was very, I guess, interesting. Like I said, it didn't really cover any new ground for me as far as, like, I already know about most of this stuff.
Right.
It's kind of interesting to hear some of the stuff you were saying now.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily that it swayed my opinion in it. And like I said, again, like 2.5 for me isn't necessarily bad. Mm-hmm. This is a movie I would recommend to somebody.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I was just kind of like, it was a movie. And like I said, I didn't think it felt like overlong at any point. So it's like a good movie. It's well directed.
Yeah.
You know, very strong camera work. The score was really good, and any of the music choices were good.
Agree.
Yeah. But just like I said, just as far as like a movie goes, it's kind of
right.
It was meh for me.
I gotta find a 5-star movie for you. I don't think maybe a 4.5. Let's do that. I got you a 4.
Yeah, you got me a 4.
That's my next goal.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to recommend that we watch City of God.
Cool. I don't know what that is.
Yeah,
as usual.
You're gonna like it.
All right. You've said that before.
I know. Well, we'll see.
All right, we'll see how it goes. Thank you guys for listening to me talk. My name is Jesse Hughes.
And I've been Dan Gilmore.
This is Show and Tell. See you in 2 weeks.